Good evening, everyone. Severe with their Team 9 meteorologist, Nathan Shot, joining you for this edition of Nate at 8. Thanks so much for joining me on this Sunday evening. Hopefully, everyone had a wonderful weekend, and what a gorgeous one we had. A lot of sunshine in place. Some more of this pretty cool mornings. Lows dip into the 40s for both of these mornings, but we climbed well into the 70s for these afternoons. So more of a warmer end, but certainly a pretty cool start to these mornings. Thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it as always. Coming up for this edition of Nate at 8, of course, we're taking a look at the week ahead. And overall, as we look at this week, there's a lot of similarities to the week we just had. A lot of just unseasonably cold temperatures do look to continue. Now, that being said, I do think that this week we are going to be tracking some needed rain. Is it going to be a wet week, a wet pattern? Likely not. No. I think overall the pattern remains dry, but I do think we can anticipate a little more rain this week with respect to what we had for this past week. And a lot of it will likely be more confined around one day. So again, that's why I say overall it's still a dry pattern, but we can have some needed rain on the way. So we'll dive into what day to watch for that, how much we could be looking at, even though still a bit early. And we'll also, of course, be breaking down those temperatures. But overall, for a lot of the week ahead, it's still unseasonably cool. We have some days in the mix that are closer to normal, but as you'll see in a minute, once we dive into it, a lot of these days still on the cool side for this time of the year, which today marks the end of August. As we look ahead for the beginning of September, those normal temperatures in the beginning of September, those normal highs are in the upper 70s. So we'll get pretty close to that. Even as we look ahead into tomorrow, we were close to that for today. Those temperatures now are falling into the 60s, again, coming off of lows that were into the 40s. Unseasonably cool into August has certainly been a, highlight here as of recent, but the overall big story to talk about for August has not been the temperatures. It has been the precipitation. And now, of course, we're wrapping up this month. We can finalize these rainfall amounts. 0.58 inches is it for the Wheeling, Ohio County Airport. That's what we've had for this month, and that's what it's going to be. And now that we're wrapping up the month here this evening, that is running a deficit of over 3 inches. Typically for the month, we're at 3.62 inches. We're running a deficit over 3 inches, and largely due to this month. For the year, now running a deficit over 2 inches below where we're typically at this point into the year. We had a wet start to the summer, but since the end of July, this has been a historic dry end to the summer. And looking at 0.58 inches, it is a record, not by a little bit. How about we cut the record in half? 1.16 inches, you cut it in half, and that's what we had. So we surpassed the record by a substantial amount. The previous was 1951 at 1.16 inches, coming in at 0.58 inches. And again, just surpassing the previous record by a staggering amount, coming in this year as the driest August on record for the Wheeling area. And how about this? We look at 0.58 inches, and this also ranks among some of the driest months that we've had observed for the Wheeling area. And another kicker, how about this January was also in the top 10. We've had two top 10 driest months on record for the Wheeling area. Again, this is all time on record, no specific month, just throughout the year. The lowest total precipitation over 1 month period. And in the top 10, 2 of those have occurred for this year. What a staggering statistic that is as well. January was 0.44 inches. And of course, this August, 0.58 inches. What a staggering statistic. 2 for this year. And again, that being considered, we are lucky we've had some wet periods in the mix because, if not, we'd be looking at a repeat of last year with some historic drought conditions. But, thankfully, outside of these 2 historically dry months, we have tracked, that wet start to summer. We certainly saw quite a bit of precipitation, not record breaking, but, overall was certainly more of a wet pattern from June and July when we had that stretch of some humid weather as well. We picked up quite a bit of rain during that stretch. So thankfully, We've had a decent amount of rain that we're not running a large deficit for the year, but we are certainly trending in the direction now with this historic stretch of dry weather since the end of July, and just looks to continue into the beginning of September as well, that we will have to watch. We don't have any drought conditions yet in our area, but we are trending abnormally dry. So it is possible here with the latest drought monitor coming out this Thursday, if not possibly the following Thursday. If we continue this dry pattern, which we likely will, we could start to see some spots in our area start to enter drought conditions. We are certainly trending that way. And again, we're getting close to it. Abnormally dry conditions currently being observed across the area. And as this overall dry pattern looks to carry over into the beginning of September, we certainly can start to see some drought conditions develop. Hello there, Suzanne. Happy early Labor Day. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hello to you. Good evening, Drew. How are you doing this evening? I'm doing well. What a perfect day weather-wise. Sure was. Absolutely gorgeous. Blue skies, sunshine. It felt just right with the sun out all day and barely any wind. Does tomorrow look the same? I think tomorrow's going to be pretty similar for Labor Day. I'm glad there will rain later in the week. I hope it's productive rain too. Me too, Drew. Hopefully, we're not getting less than a tenth of an inch, 0.01 inches, I believe. That was registered at the Wheeling-Iowa County Airport with that very light rain that we had Thursday evening. So hopefully this is more, like you mentioned, Drew. And I think that potential is there. We're going to dive into that we can certainly see something measurable that's at least greater than a tenth of an inch, as we certainly need it across the area. Austin, good evening. This weekend was a very good one. Sure was. Got to hear the roaring boats yesterday while walking from the Vintage Regatta. Very cool. Can't believe that we're ending August with a chilly evening. Sure thing. And this has been a historic. We've dived into that some here over this past week. It certainly has been a historic cool end to this month. And, we look at those highs below 80 for a week straight here at the end of the month. And that's something we haven't had in 6 years in August, dealing with a stretch of a week or longer with highs below 80. It's been 6 years since that happened. And we look back over 25 years. This year marked only the 5th time that's happened over 25 years. So a pretty rare occurrence for us to deal with this cool of a stretch of weather in the month of August. Drew says, I sure to expect the driest August on record, and this driest August since I've been here in the Ohio Valley, dating back to 2012. Yeah, as wet of a start of the summer it was, certainly just hit the brakes hard, didn't it, with this pattern? A certain real break in that rain, and it just says this dry pattern does not let up, even since the end of July. Drew says, I know you'll wait tomorrow, most likely, but is September a rainy month or a drier month historically? September typically a bit drier, Drew. September typically drier. Of course, the wild card, right? The wild card this time of the year, the hurricanes, right? So we get remnants of hurricane. It's always the wild card. We get to September, October. We get that, especially September. That's the big wild card for this coming month. Typically, it is a drier month, but what can really skew it? Well, the remnants of a hurricane. So that's always the wild card for us into September, Drew. Happy Labor Day to you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate all of you tuning in. And, I think overall for our Labor Day, we're going to get into it, but I think overall, a lot of the same as what we've had for this weekend. The beautiful weather does look to carry over. And we jump into Futurecast and how we can map out that Labor Day for you. As well as we look ahead into Futurecast tomorrow, it's still on the cool side. Now, Futurecast, I think, may be cooling us a little too much there. But what we see here around 8 a.m., I think this is a better depiction of those lows. Yes, some of those cooler spots can get back in the 40s, but likely holding closer to 50. Will it feel warmer tomorrow with respect to this morning? Likely not. I think it's feeling similar. We're talking about it possibly a difference of a couple degrees. That's really not noticeable. It's still going to feel cool/chilly to some of us tomorrow morning. Really, tomorrow morning, it's going to feel similar likely to what we had for this morning. And tomorrow afternoon, likely feeling pretty similar to what we had for this afternoon. And again, still quite a bit of sunshine for your Monday. So yes, for Labor Day, a lot of the same, I think, is what we saw for today and what we saw for yesterday. And I know we barely had a clouded sight for today, a few more clouds in the mix on Saturday. And we could see maybe more of a sight like what we had Saturday with a few more clouds in the mix. But, this is overall still absolutely gorgeous Labor Day ahead for us. No threat for rain, plenty of sunshine. a pretty cool start, but a warmer end, much like today, ahead for your Monday. Now, by Tuesday is when I anticipate we will start to see more clouds spill into the area. We'll get more of that mix of sun and clouds, and you'll notice the Futurecast is depicting something possibly stray developing in the afternoon. It's possible we do start a slight chance for something stray for Tuesday, but it's one of those situations where it's mainly, if not completely dry. So that's not going to be our day where we're tracking those higher rain chances, but that is the day where we start that at least slight chance that we could spot something developing into Tuesday. But notice then what happens a couple days later than that. Notice the chances they start to further pick up. And of course, the one day, the glaring that is the outlier, right? With respect to the others, of course, Thursday. So Thursday does look to be our day this week where I think we have great odds to pick up some needed rain. Outside of that, maybe something stray or more isolated. It's possible. Maybe if we're lucky enough, we could get a few showers developing later in the day, Wednesday. But it's more of a chance at that point. It is more likely Thursday is going to be the day where we can deal with more rain coming our way, thankfully. And in terms of rainfall amounts, it's still a little early looking at all the way into Thursday. But right now, models are hitting at about a quarter to maybe up to a half of an inch. But oftentimes, probably leaning closer to a quarter of an inch. But within a quarter to a half of an inch, needed rain. We'll certainly take anything we can get, and it's certainly better than the 0.01 or trace that we had with that very light precipitation that moved through on Thursday. Barely measurable, but it was that very light rain that we had move through Thursday evening. I think this does look to bring at least more than that coming our way for this Thursday. Yes, one Thursday to the next. This does look to bring more than that, and hopefully we can at least get about a quarter of an inch from that rain as it moves through the area on Thursday. And yes, Thursday, just be prepared if you do have any outdoor plans Thursday. You're likely dealing with some rain. Outside of that, these are still mostly dry days. Wednesday, Tuesday, Friday. Just a slight chance something more stray or isolated, but those days still look mostly dry. Thursdays are going to be our one and only more wet day, more impactful for any outdoor plans day that we'll have likely as we go through the week, because rain chances, they just drop off likely into that following weekend. So this is our one and only day likely as it stands now that we're dealing with more wet conditions than dry conditions, I think, going throughout the day. And again, we need it. We'll certainly take it. We'll need any rain we can get. But you'll notice that while temperatures start off closer to 80, which is pretty much on par with that average high for this time of the year, it does change, right? And it starts with that rain on Thursday, a cold front passage, and then temperatures drop back below normal. So a little more seasonable start to the week here. But overall, if you sum up the week going through Sunday, it's still on the cool side, right? It's still on the cool side. Those highs likely more lower 70s Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then picking up towards the mid 70s by Sunday for that following weekend. Then temperatures do look to climb back closer towards 80 degrees going into the following week. I will say that, even looking ahead going into that second week of September, doesn't look to flip the script. It doesn't look like we're going to deal with a hot stretch of weather then in that second week of September, but maybe we could string together at least more seasonable temperatures. I think, the better bet now, I think, is just seeing a pretty cool pattern just continuing into that first half of September. And we'll notice that we look at the long range forecasts, a product issued by the Climate Prediction Center, and we start to look at 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 day forecasts. We start to look towards that middle of December. You'll notice that, of course, the glaring part there going into at least to start that second week of September, still great odds for those below normal temperatures, and then starting to shift to more equal chances. So a little more seasonable temperatures possibility, but the dry, still anticipating a pretty dry pattern, that 8 to 14 day forecast. So, again, looking at those long range forecasts, the safer bet is still that going into that second week of September, we could see a lot of the same that we've dealt with here as of recent, that is still on the cool side for this time of the year, and it's still on the dry side. Once we get past that, there's still not a glaring pattern flip. Look at 3 to 4 week forecast. So even getting later September, there's not a glaring hot or wet stretch of weather ahead. Certainly, once we get to 3 to 4 weeks out, the forecast, even once we get past a week, it really should be taken with a grain of salt. But especially trying to forecast 3 to 4 weeks out, there's nothing glaring there that's indicating a real hot or real wet stretch of weather. So, as it stands now here near term, it doesn't look to be a big flip in this pattern here near term, at least looking out a week and even into that second week out into that beginning of September. So we'll see. If you've been liking these cooler temperatures, and maybe you'll be rooting for a lot of this continuing into the beginning of September. If not, well, unfortunately, there's no real glaring pattern flip in sight to where we'd be dealing with a warm stretch of weather or a wet stretch of weather for this time of the year. So, as it stands now, without that big indication of that pattern flip coming our way, really just anticipating quite a bit of the same, where, a lot of these days are ending up dry. A lot of these days are ending up, if seasonable, but even below normal. So not only near normal, but even below normal. No real warm day ahead for this time of the year. And a lot of these days likely ending up dry, just like what we had here for the end of August. Unseasonably cool stretch, dry stretch. The dry stretch has been since the end of July. That just looks to continue here for the beginning of September. But the more cool pattern that we saw develop at the end of August now looks to continue into the beginning of September. Dan, good evening. Thank you for tuning in. And Brenda says, love this weather. Brenda's going to love what's coming up there at the beginning of September. Drew says, the only thing I don't like about the Thursday forecast is rainy and cool at the same time. I prefer it warmer if it rains. Yeah, not the best to have the cooler rain. I agree, Drew. Like to keep these Friday nights dry for high school football, and that is the good news, Drew. I mean, we'll still have some games Thursday night, but it's good timing that the rain looks to come and go before we get to our Friday night football games, and likely dry then going into the weekend. So set up for another pretty cool, probably Friday night for our high school football games, but slight chance. I think we'll end up dry. I think there's great odds we'll end up dry for our Friday night football games again this week. But yes, that rain could be a bit of a problem for our Thursday night games. Again, this isn't going to be a real impactful event. Obviously, it's nothing we're not going to be tracking. Likely not going to be tracking flooding, severe weather event coming our way, but really just some needed rain to soak up probably what we'll deal with on Thursday. And that will be, like Drew mentioned, a pretty cool rain. Those highs could struggle depending on the timing of the rain moving in. If it holds off until later in the afternoon, if we could see it arrive a bit earlier into the day, then we could struggle to even get out of the 60s on Thursday. If it holds off till later on to the afternoon, evening, if it's later on the day, we could climb in the lower 70s, may have to adjust those highs as we get a better grasp on the precise timing of that rain and its arrival on Thursday with that cold front passage. So just a matter of fine tuning the timing of that once we get closer to Thursday, going throughout this week. But that is it. The 9+1 day forecast. Most days likely dry. And most days, well, on the cool side. A lot of the same, right, as what we just saw for the end of August. So no real change to discuss in terms of dealing with a warm or a wet pattern for the beginning of September coming our way. And yes, September typically on the dry side, typically a lot of 70s in September. That's a normal highs throughout the month. Their normal high drops to near 70 by the end of the month. So September is always one of those months that is pretty nice weather-wise, typically, right? Typically, it's not real wet. Typically, decent amount of sun, lots of 70s, that great temp, more comfortable temp, right? And September, pretty nice weather for us here in the Valley, typically. Of course, the big wild card, like I said earlier, though, any remnants of a hurricane, right? And then you get that wet, dreary, and sometimes really chilly weather this time of the year with the remnants of what can be on the chilly side with the remnants of a hurricane. That's always the wild card. Something else we'll keep an eye on as we go throughout this month. Thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it as always. I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. Hopefully you have a great Labor Day coming up. Hopefully you have some fun, exciting plans coming up for Labor Day tomorrow. Again, a lot of what we saw this weekend, it just continues into Labor Day. Absolutely gorgeous. It's after that Then into Tuesday, that we'll start to spot more clouds moving into the region. Rain chances start to pick up, and then that's all out ahead of showers turning likely by the time we get into Thursday. Maybe something more isolated before then, Tuesday into Wednesday, but Thursday is going to be our day, likely wet day out of the week as we look ahead going into that first week of September. I appreciate it as always. You can catch me coming up Newsnight at 10 on Fox 9, Newsnight tonight at 11 for the latest. And until then, for that next edition of Nate at 8 tomorrow evening as well. I appreciate it as always. I hope you have a wonderful evening, wonderful Labor Day. I'll see all of you on the next edition of Nate at 8.